The widely recognized expert group and technology platform in an era of research that complements internal capabilities in oncology. It has strengthened the company's cancer treatment portfolio. The third era that we're going to talk about is the state aid policy conducted by the European Commission. EU policy on state aid was created with the intention of limiting unfair or unequal benefits potentially granted to businesses by national public bodies such as grants, favorable interest taxes, etc. The exemptions, as outlined in our class slides, can be vague and varied that the EU Commission has a considerable amount of discretion when deciding when state aid is appropriate. These exemptions will certainly benefit those businesses who qualify, as quote-unquote free capital is a desirable thing for any company. So in one sense, the exemptions provided within EU competition policy can be seen as an opportunity for those companies who qualify for it. These include disadvantaged regions, small and medium-sized enterprises, also firms involved in research and development, R&D, the protection of the environment, employee training, and culture promotion. One argument supporting state aid is that concerning infant industries. Industries deemed important or to have significant potential may need some initial help in the form of trade protection or subsidies in order to adequately develop to the point where they are self-sustaining. Although there are fewer contemporary examples of this in the EU, we can see that the Commission has allowed for this type of aid under the support of SMEs exemption. This is a particularly important step in maintaining a free and competitive market within the EU. Policymakers felt that if state aid were left unregulated, it could have a significant negative impact on the EU common market. In certain cases, state subsidies allow underperforming companies to remain in businesses when natural market forces might otherwise force these companies out of the market. This then could create an artificial marketplace where inefficient businesses continue to operate. This is seen as a negative impact, as generally, if a company is receiving essentially free capital, it's less motivated to remain or become profitable, and consequently innovation is less of a priority. Due to that policy, firms previously aided can find themselves left out afterwards. Moreover, a company not needed to be helped won't be able to receive any state aid as it was possible previously. The first example that we have is the one of Landesbanken. Landesbanken obtained state guarantees from their governments, protecting them from bankruptcy. These guarantees allowed the public banks to grant loans on more favorable conditions than their commercial competitors. After an investigation of the guarantees, the European Commission concluded that the guarantees constituted illegal state aid and negotiated their phasing out with the German and Austrian governments. The second case that we have is the SCI systems. In the late 1990s, the Dutch authorities granted SCI Systems a generous aid package to build a factory for the assembly of PCs for Hewlett-Packard (HP) in Friesland. In February 2001, the EU Commission found that this aid broke the rules on regional investment aid. These rules prevent authorities from having an expensive subsidy race to attract mobile investment projects and the jobs they could bring to their region. Such races would be costly for taxpayers and undermine cohesion objectives because richer authorities could continuously outbid poorer ones. In August 2002, the company paid back NGL 3.8 million euros to the Dutch authorities, 1.7 million euros, sorry. The third case that illustrates what we're talking about is the one talking about Fiat. The European Commission approved training aid amounting to 38 million euros for the Italian car manufacturer Fiat to improve the knowledge of workers whose jobs were at risk due to rationalization measures and who needed training to adapt to changes in production processes and demands. The European Commission is generally favorable towards training aid measures. Several European councils have declared that training is an important factor to make the European economy more competitive on the world's market. However, one question to ask about this case is whether or not this type of practice undermines what the Commission is trying to avoid. Thus providing these subsidies to Fiat artificially prop them up and reduce competitiveness within the automobile industry. It's evident that their intent was to protect against those employees losing their jobs. Is this an example of another company which is too big to fail? The last example that we're going to see in this era is the one regrouping three technology companies, Motorola, Philips, and ST Micro. In 2003, the Commission approved aid in the amount of 293 million euros for a joint research project of three companies to develop new technology for first prototypes of integrated circuits with nanometric dimensions. The aid was approved for research in all stages: fundamental, pre-competitive, and industrial research. One of the positive elements of the project was the substantial increase of research personnel as well as the increase in R&D expenditures, thereby contributing to European Council targets to increase R&D spending by industry and member states to foster the competitiveness of European industry. The last important era covered by the EU competition policy is the liberalization of services for general interest, previously owned by national organizations. Those types of services are no longer monopolized by governments, but are now open to competition. The major opportunity created by this decision has been the creation of new sectors for firms to enter and compete, therefore providing customers with products and better quality and price. However, the companies deciding to compete in such market are faced with more responsibilities for consumers because of the general interest nature of those services. Risks that does not exist for other companies are therefore present. However, this gap is filled by the state aid policies like stated earlier. One example of the positive effect of this regulation is the low-cost airline companies. Opening the airline industry permitted the lowering of the barriers to entry, and new competitors with new business structures and strategies were able to reach a different type of customers than the biggest airline companies. The other example, and this one is talking about the risks that come along with the new responsibility, is the Dutch Post case. Their costs were higher than competitors because they had to cover a wider range of network. This made them sell at premium and they had to justify themselves. The Commission reviewed the case and gave them the right to increase prices just in order to cover their costs. Based on its primary objectives of ensuring fair and effective competition among businesses in the EU, it would be hard to argue against the merit of the Commission's policy on state aid. However, there remain some questions with regard to the effectiveness of this policy. We would argue, however, that concerns about how effective this policy is in curtailing inappropriate aid are not unfounded. For instance, when talking about the antitrust policies, the amount of the fines can be discussed. When the Commission fines one of the biggest companies in the world an amount far from its annual revenues, the effectiveness of those fines are not as strong as they should be. Moreover, only 18 mergers have been ruled out between 1990 and 2005, and only 2 since then. This policy is mainly telling the companies to try their luck, and if not, they just have to change some of the negative points and that's it. This can also come from the fact that mergers were strongly supported in order to create European companies big enough to compete with the large American companies, but this trend has now slowed down. A glaring example would be Italian airline Alitalia. For many years, this company was allowed approximately 4.9 billion euros in state subsidies. It took until 2006 for the Commission to officially prohibit the Italian government from providing aid to the company. When examining the type of subsidies provided to Alitalia, it appears many of them would clearly contradict acceptable types of state aid outlined in Article 87.